Hello, welcome back to U.S. history. Back to talking about the Civil War. I hope you all had a good break. Um, just so you know, it's about 2:30 on Thursday, the 19th. So, especially the kids in 5B, if you're wondering why I'm wearing the same shirt, it's because I saw y'all like 20 minutes ago. So we're going to talk about Reconstruction. This is part one of 2 weeks of Reconstruction. We did 2 weeks on the lead up to the war. We did a week talking about the war. Y'all just had Thanksgiving break. We're going to do 2 weeks of Reconstruction. Then we're going to do our assessments. And then we have our winter break. Just to remind you, here's our big ideas. To what extent did Lincoln free the slaves? What does their freedom look like in reality? So the second question is the one we're really going to be trying to dig into here. We're going to be trying to think about what freedom is. So obviously, the 13th Amendment was passed. Slavery is outlawed. All of these people who were slaves are now free in like a legal sense. But we're going to think about kind of what does it mean to actually be free? Is it just a legal status? Or is there something bigger that we need to consider ourselves free? What is Reconstruction? Literally just to construct again, to build again. So we're talking about rebuilding the country. Reconstruction era, this is the period after the Civil War, focused on rebuilding the US, focused on coping with the death and destruction of the war, and also focused on integrating the 4 million ex-slaves into the country. Just note this word freedmen. We're going to start to integrate that into our vocabulary for the unit. Freedmen is just the word that's used to describe these ex-slaves after the Civil War. And then if it helps, you sort of frame the content. We're talking about 1863, so the end of the war, through 1877, so about 14 years. It's important to understand that there's many competing forces during Reconstruction. So many in the North are mad, legitimately mad at the South. They're looking around. They're seeing the debt. They're seeing how many people died. They're looking at this death and destruction caused by the war, and they want punishment. They want the South to be punished for what they did. This is not everybody's opinion. People on both sides, the North and the South, think that maybe the best thing for the country is to just say, like, it happened and it was terrible, but the best thing we can do as a country is just put it behind us, rebuild, move on. The other thing I want to note here is that folks who believe that like Black people were less human than white people, slave owners, people in the South, people in the states that rebelled, they didn't just stop being racist. They didn't look at the 13th Amendment and say, like, oh, okay, they're free. All right, I guess they're equal. That might seem obvious considering how much racism still exists in the world, but just so we know what's happening on the ground, there's still folks that are not happy about the idea that Black people are free and not happy about the idea that these people are going to be integrated into society around them. Civil War ends on April 9th, 1865. You don't need the date. I put the date because this is the important part. About a week later, Lincoln's assassinated. We'll never know what Lincoln's plan would have actually looked like in practice, but instead we get Andrew Johnson. So here's where we're at. Here's where we are after the war. Country's in debt. A bunch of people are dead, mostly young men. That's who was fighting in the military. We've got millions of freedmen, millions of ex-slaves that we need to figure out how to integrate into society. Plantations are left without labor, so the South doesn't really have any system. Their entire economic system was based on this free labor, so they don't really have any way to rebuild. And then, as I mentioned, Northerners are mad. So again, we've got this idea of reunion and reconciliation. Let's just move on. And then we've got this idea of punishment here. Andrew Johnson, the president during the first part of Reconstruction, He's a former slaveholder. He favored quick reintegration of Southern states. Um, he wanted to just get on with things as quickly as possible, and he wanted to take this opportunity to really kind of not rock the boat. We've got the country back together. Let's just kind of close the door on that whole war thing and move on. He pardons about 13,000 people. There's no federal trials or charges of treason for anybody in the South. And he kind of turns the other cheek or turns his back to these Southern states who are developing laws to restrict these newly freed Black people. These laws are Black codes. We'll talk about them later in class. They're sort of our precursors to the Jim Crow laws. Um, but yeah, as soon as the slaves are freed, we start to see Southern states, um, again, back to that previous slide, not just be like, okay, you're free, welcome to society, but instead start to figure out ways to keep them from owning property, keep them from voting, them from being full participants in society. A little bit more on Johnson. The Civil Rights Act, he vetoes this. He claims it's discriminated. It discriminates against whites. Um, if that sounds familiar, it's something that still exists in conversations around racism today. His veto is overridden by Congress. The 14th Amendment, um, which offers citizenship and equal protection for all persons born or naturalized in the United States. The 14th Amendment, which is specifically designed to say Black people are entitled to citizenship in reference to our Dred Scott decision from earlier in the unit, and also equal protections. Any right that applies to white people should apply to Black people and anybody, any color, any race, any gender for a person that's born or naturalized in the United States. Johnson has no say. He can't veto a constitutional amendment, but he does openly oppose it. It's passed anyway. It's ratified anyway. Last thing I want to say, just to sort of put us in the mindset to talk about the things we need to talk about, is I want to talk about the Freedmen's Bureau. So we're going to talk about Black codes, all of these things. We'll talk about the KKK as well. These things that start to pop up in the South to restrict newly freed Black people, to restrict freedmen's. The Freedmen's Bureau is created specifically to help poor whites and newly freed slaves after the war. They provide food, medical aid, they establish schools, they offer legal assistance, they reunite families. Um, this is specifically designed to help both poor whites, but it ends up specifically being a system that benefits these newly freed slaves, these freedmen. Many whites are unhappy with the Bureau. We're going to see responses to this. So laws begin to pass in the South to push back against things like the Freedmen's Bureau, things like the Civil Rights Act, and things like the 14th Amendment. Again, remember, these former racists didn't just stop being racist. And then, as I mentioned already, these Black codes are our prelude to Jim Crow laws, which we will also talk about when they come up. And that's it. That's all I got. Welcome back, and I will see you all in